Brian, thank you. We have 4 panelists with us tonight to address your questions and comments about red light cameras and cell phone bans. We want you to send us yours through our Facebook page or Twitter. My 4 guests are Paul Harpole, the mayor of Amarillo, Mark Nair, a member of the City Traffic Commission, and 2 citizens who have expressed their opinions on both these matters, David Cossey and Bob Tolliver. Gentlemen, thanks for braving the weather and being with us tonight. We get the ball rolling tonight with Amarillo's cell phone ban, which has been in effect for almost 3 weeks now, and yet some people still question why a ban exists. A city commissioner on Pronews 7, Chanel Douglas, give us a brief history of its development.
In Amarillo, it takes 10 or 15 minutes to get everywhere. A text can wait. A text can wait that long. And I think it's important for all of us to be really careful on the road and to realize that, you know, cars weigh a lot. We're driving, we have a huge responsibility to drive safely.
City Commissioner Ellen Robertson Green remembers when talk of a cell phone ban began.
I was actually chair of the first subcommittee of a traffic commission that studied a cell phone, texting, and a handheld ban for just the school districts in Amarillo, and that was way back in September of 2010.
She says the idea turned into what should be done for the entire city when the Traffic Commission submitted its recommendation.
Then they brought to the City Commission a request to have us have a handheld ban. So no texting and no talking on your cell phone if you're holding it. If you have a Bluetooth, it's fine. You can talk on your cell phone.
It's something that was studied and discussed for months and months, and she says the ban was considered the best way to keep citizens safe.
The people at the city wanted to do their homework, and so, as I said, we have been looking at this for 2.5 years. We've been studying the issue. We've been seeing the best way to make to create an ordinance that police can enforce.
Chanel Douglas, Pronews 7.
Gentlemen, we'll start the discussion with this comment we got on Facebook from Rick. Rick says, I'm against the total handheld cell phone ban. I could and would have supported banning texting and driving. If you think this should have been and should be put to a public vote, sign the petition. So I'll open it up to you. Is this something that should be brought to a public vote? Mayor Harpole, we'll start with you.
Well, certainly that's the avenue that people can take on any ordinance that we pass. If people sign a petition, group of citizens gather that petition and submit it, then we decide as a commission to put it on the ballot or not. And certainly there has been that privilege for our citizens all throughout our history, and it's an important privilege for our citizens. But obviously it is something that takes a lot of effort, and we encourage it if somebody thinks that we haven't done the proper thing.
Right next to you, Mark Nair, any complications or perspective on that?
Well, I think that any kind of democratic action is great, and if you get enough people, according to the city charter, that's fantastic, to come and reevaluate an ordinance. In this case, it's up to the people who want to sign the petition to come up to an election and see if they want to change it. We did a lot of work and research and studying this, and it's a complex issue. And sometimes when people jump into it and say, let's just vote this down, I think that we avoid looking at the details.
Mm-hmm. David Cossey, you support the idea of a petition drive and a ballot question on this?
I definitely support the people having their voice heard in this. When it was originally started 2.5 years ago, she admittedly said it was texting only. And a majority of petition signers said, yes, texting only we agree with. When it went to the full handheld debate, it was pretty split at the commission meetings. And so I felt when there's not a clear and concise for or against, then those are the decisions that should be left to the people. It shouldn't be every decision, but definitely the ones that aren't clear.
Okay, and Bob, your support of this?
I very much am in support of putting this to a public vote as a referendum ballot. There are also other legal means to overturn the ordinance. However, at this juncture, I think it's important that the people help make a decision about how they are able to best run their lives and be safe.
Using a reverse order on this next question from Facebook, Mary says, using cell phones and running red lights while driving is not a liberty. I don't understand how you will put on a seatbelt to protect yourself but don't want to put down your cell phone to protect your own family or mine. The question there, aren't people confusing rights with privileges or conveniences? We'll start with you on that.
Oh, I think absolutely. Driving is not a right, it's a privilege. Talking on a cell phone is not a right, it's a privilege. It's about whether you abuse that privilege or not, as well as whether government, whether it be local or national, make the assumption and tag you as an individual that is incapable of making sound decisions, and in the case of cell phone use, handheld, whether you have the capability of having increased risk awareness and being safe while doing that task.
David, where do you stand on that issue? Liberties, conveniences?
Well, thanks to the Constitution, everything is a right first, until we as citizens take it upon ourselves to turn it into a privilege. And we've done that with driving through licensing and things like that. However, I fail to see how there's a significant danger between holding a phone here versus just having a conversation with somebody in the vehicle with you, versus having the phone down there on speakerphone. You can actually lose the phone in the floorboard a lot faster with it on speakerphone bouncing around than if you just held it to your ear. So I fail to see that connection.
Mark, did this issue come up, the liberties and conveniences in Traffic Commission on this issue?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's a philosophical distinction. And what we really discussed were the ideas that your liberty extends only as far as someone else's liberty. So my right of safety trumps your right of convenience. Now, some of the comments we've had, it's interesting because we talk about a phone rattling around on the floor, or we talk about how a conversation on a phone is different than a conversation in a car. There are distinct differences, and this is what we researched in our literature review, and we have the studies for it.
Your stand on this too?
A friend of mine put it succinctly to me. He said, I'm going to visit my father in the nursing home. He strapped himself into those bombers in World War II, and this wasn't one of the rights that he fought for.
Got it. I'm reminded when we first moved here in the 80s that people in Texas were talking about their God-given right to drink while they were driving. And we saw how that got changed too. Round 2 coming up with red light cameras after this break. Red light cameras, they've always been and continue to be controversial. How did we get here? Pronews 7's Andrea Flores talked with a few people today who explained that process.
The city of Amarillo had entered 5 years ago into a contract with ATS, American Traffic Solutions, to install and maintain red light cameras at various intersections throughout the city.
Camera locations were then determined by commissioners and a citizens advisory committee.
The traffic engineering department does a study which is prescribed by state law at each intersection to determine whether or not there is a physical or geometric flaw with the intersection.
They then worked with ATS to determine camera placement.
What the city does is we lease the equipment which ATS installs and maintains. We lease that from them. We're just now starting our next 5-year contract. Obviously, we're obligated under our contract to pay for the leasing of the equipment to ATS. After that, the fines that are collected, half of that money goes to the state. It's earmarked for the development of trauma centers across the state. That has not happened yet.
And what about the future of these cameras?
Ultimately, it comes down to the city commission. They're the ones that are signing the contracts. They ultimately run the city. So it's really up to them what the future is.
Andrea Flores, Pronews 7.
Panel will start this discussion with a question a lot of people had. One of them was Trevor, who wrote on Facebook, I don't think they have anything to do about safety, these red light cameras, just another way for the city to get more money. Issue of putting profit over traffic safety and using RLCs as a questionable revenue source. Many people ask, isn't just an unnecessary step in making money for the city? Mark, you want to address that?
It raises revenue, that's right, but it raises revenue for safety. The money that the city collects, and I was on the citizens advisory, that the revenue that the city collects goes to safety, especially for those intersections.
The chunk of money, that's the state and what they do. But this is designed specifically as a safety issue.
David, do you think that this is an unnecessary fine?
Well, I definitely think it's unnecessary to have the red light cameras. The Federal Highway Administration says increasing the yellow times at these intersections that do have a lot of wrecks by just merely 1 second would decrease over 40% of the wrecks that occur. So that's a very simple aspect. The other side of it is, why have 28 states banned red light cameras? Are they not in favor of safety on traffic? I mean, so there's a lot of questions, a lot of disagreement, and I think the people are best to decide by allowing them to vote on it.
Mr. Mayor, talk about the revenue source and safety at the same time.
I was on the commission in 2004 when it was first enacted, and I will tell you that I was not for this when it was first proposed. But what switched me on it was watching the video, the dramatic video that is there when we take a picture of someone breaking the law. And what happened in those was dramatic, and it was deadly. And I just have an expectation when I go through a green light that somebody isn't going to run a red light. And I think it's a very efficient a way to deal with this, and it's absolutely deals with the safety of the people in our city.
And Bob Tolliver, is this just another way for the city to get more money and nothing else?
It is a revenue-generating source for the city, and we do have to be cautious when we drive. The statistics that I've seen that are available through the Department of Transportation for the state of Texas over the last 3 years have shown that there has been zero decline in red light traffic fatalities and injuries. The data out there suggests also that removal, as the city is promoting to do, of one of the existing cameras to another locations, tests and research has shown that in areas where the camera has been removed, the accident rate increases.
Yeah, there's plenty of studies out there online. You can do your checking and see which ones are there, but there seem to be a lot of things that refute studies on their own. We have about a 4-minute segment coming up. We'll get to more of your questions right after these messages. Thank you for all your questions tonight. Panel, this one came from James on Facebook. Does the ban prohibit GPS use of the cell phone? I use my smartphone as a navigation device quite a bit. Does it prohibit, and should it prohibit? Paul?
It does not use it as long as you aren't inputting while you're driving.
Okay.
So you're able, with the cell phone, you're able to pick it up, answer, set it down, speak to a speakerphone, use a Bluetooth, and simply keep your eyes on the road.
Okay, Mark, I'll address, is that true, and maybe should it go the other way, or is that a smart way to
No, that's right, and that's what we kind of worked on the architecture of this to make sure that people can have that flexibility. It's really about handheld use, and that's what we really try to focus on because of the danger of that when driving.
David, are you thinking this is dangerous also, the GPS use in front of you with that?
I would say any distraction that you're not able to do while driving is dangerous. It's very simple. I mean, just don't do things you know you can't do safely.
And Bob, your take?
I think it is as dangerous to input a GPS setting as it is to texting. Therefore, I agree with not being able to use the GPS to input while driving.
Bob, we'll start with you. This is from 2 different sources, Mary on Twitter and Sharon on our website. Similar questions. If you don't know the answer, we'll just pass it along and see what happens. But do you know what traffic safety programs have been put in place with the $2 million we've generated so far from the red light camera program? Do you know?
I have no knowledge of that.
We'll pass to David to see if you have research on that.
I would say nothing that's decreased the wrecks based on the research that's out there.
Yeah,
the wrecks are about the same, but I don't know what
do we have more officers
programs
because of it? Do we have more? Are we buying more red lights? Mark, do you know?
Yes, we have purchased traffic control devices and focused on the intersections where we have the most issues. Red light wrecks have decreased over this period. Okay. And there hasn't been an increase on rear-end accidents that people talk about either.
And Paul, $2
We're
million?
looking at anything to take it out of the budget and use this money to prevent accidents. So red lights are extended. There's all sorts of devices that we've installed with this money that wouldn't have existed without the cameras.
Probably time for one more, real quick. If driving distracted is really an issue, Stewart says radios, kids, drinking, non-alcoholic beverages, eating should be banned also. The slippery slope kind of question that, Mark, I saw in the Traffic Commission report. Should this go further?
It is not, it's not applicable if those other things are a big problem. When I take my eyes off the road to do a text, I'm an unguided missile for hundreds of yards, and it's dangerous.
Mark, should we go further? Months
of study, debate, issues, 15 studies we looked at, all of them shows that there is not a slippery slope that we look at. We don't talk about, we talk about cell phones. And that's the focus of this, and there's nothing else that we're discussing.
David, you were talking about distractions. Aren't these other distractions too?
Yes, and actually it's not a slippery slope, it's a misdirection. There's numerous other things that are more dangerous while you drive that they're not addressing. They're addressing the feel-good ordinances that everybody has a cell phone. That's one way we can affect everyone.
And Bob?
The entire issue is distracted driving. Driver inattention has been number 2 for the accident cause in collisions for Texas. Number 2 the last 3 years. Cell phones have contributed to 0.5% of all accidents in the state of Texas. Number 25, turn signals, in-vehicle distractions, i.e. eating, dogs in laps, drinking, conversations with passengers are all known collision contributing factors.
Thank you for that. Bob and David and Mark and Paul, thank you so much for being here. We're out of time. Great thoughts. We may do this again because there's so much to talk about. That weather with Brian James coming up next.